exchange for hostages freed by Hamas. They've arrived in the Gazan city of Khan Yunis. Thousands of people have gathered to welcome the prisoners, celebrating by cheering and waving Palestinian flags and Hamas flags. Meanwhile, all 20 remaining living Israeli hostages have been released by Hamas after more than 2 years in captivity in Gaza. From the Israeli Knesset, President Donald Trump has declared the start of a golden age for Israel and the Middle East. Marking the historic Hamas hostage release, he has described it as the end of an age of terror and death and the beginning of faith, hope, and God, envisioning a new era of stability and cooperation. United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced that Britain will provide a $27 million aid package to Gaza in order to support water, sanitation and hygiene services in the region. The funds will be delivered through UNICEF, the World Food Programme, and the Norwegian Refugee Council. Meanwhile, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has urged President Donald Trump today to press Russia to end its war in Ukraine following Trump's involvement in brokering a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Merz has expressed hope that President Trump would use his influence as seen in the Middle East to help resolve the situation in Ukraine and Russia as well. US President Donald Trump has assured that tensions with China will ease. He praised Chinese President Xi Jinping as highly respected and emphasized that the US aims to help China, not harm it. This comes as President Trump earlier threatened to impose 100% tariffs on Chinese imports. Reappointed French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has unveiled his new cabinet, keeping most key ministers, including finance and foreign ministers, unchanged. Notable changes include Laurent Nunez as Interior Minister and Edouard Geoffroy as the Minister of Education. The death toll from flooding in central and eastern Mexico has risen to at least 64 people, with 65 more still missing. According to local authorities, the flooding caused by intense rainfall primarily affected Veracruz, Hidalgo, and Puebla states, as reported by Mexico's civil defense chief. A mass shooting at Willie's Bar in South Carolina has left 4 people dead and over 20 injured. Police are now investigating this incident, with several victims in critical conditions. Local authorities continue searching for suspects as the community mourns this tragic event. Now we start from the Middle East. Egyptian President Al-Sisi has started holding the meeting with Western and Arab officials to coordinate the implementation of Gaza ceasefire, reconstruction, and delivery of humanitarian aid. World leaders have gathered in Egypt now to attend the Middle East Summit on Gaza. This comes as U.S. President Donald Trump landed in Egypt to attend the summit. The summit is to be co-chaired by President Trump himself and Egyptian President Al-Sisi. Upon landing in Egypt, President Trump has interacted with media with the Egyptian president, where he talked about bringing back the bodies of slain Israeli hostages and the discussions regarding Phase 2 of Gaza peace plan. World leaders attending the summit includes French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, along with other leaders. The summit primarily focuses on securing and implementing the multi-phase peace agreement between Israel and Hamas. One of the key areas that is to be discussed is Gaza's future governance and the issue of Hamas disarmament, as well as deployment of international security force. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Alan Pinkas. He's a former Israeli diplomat, joins us live from Tel Aviv, and Matthew Vadam. He's an American journalist, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Now, first, I would like to go to Alan. Both our guests, welcome to NewsX World. Thank you for joining us again. Alan, how significant is today and all the what we heard from U.S. President's speech or talk in Knesset?
Well, it was significant in the sense that there's a ceasefire, at least for now. And it was significant in the sense that Israeli hostages were returned in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. And it was significant that those two first significant things happened as a result of President Trump willing to do something that his predecessors did not do, refrain from doing, and that is actually exert pressure on Israel. I wouldn't go as far as to ascribe to it significances, because I've been hearing all over the international media the words historic and transformative and inflection point and what have you. I'd be more cautious than that, because the next phases are much more difficult to implement. They don't carry that much praise and compliments as Trump is so happy to receive. And what he said today is encouraging in the sense that he said the war has ended and said that, emphasized that 3 times. However, that does not necessarily tell us how engaged and committed he will remain. So yes, of course, it's a significant day, but no, I would not make it into some kind of a historic day in the Middle East.
Right. Building on that, Matthew, I would like to come to you. What's your take about the significance, and also are you optimistic that this ceasefire will hold there? And is this a new beginning, like Alan has also mentioned, and like Trump has said that it could be the new beginning or history in making in Middle East?
Well, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic about the ceasefire holding. It's been hard to believe that Hamas was willing to give up its authority in Gaza, considering that Hamas is dedicated to the destruction of the state of Israel. So I would not be surprised if the peace does not hold, but, early indications are that it will hold. Just because it's a historic event doesn't mean that the peace will last. So we will see. I suspect Hamas is already plotting new ways to weasel out of the deal, but we shall see. Perhaps they've been moved and they feel cornered because so much destruction has been wrought in Gaza, and maybe they do want an end to it. But I suspect Hamas just wants a ceasefire so that it can regroup. And all I can say is I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot look into the future, so I don't know what will happen. But yes. It's possible the peace will hold. But I'm very dubious about Hamas's motives here, because killing Israelis is they consider it to be their job.
And now, building on that, Alan, Matthew has also mentioned there are still some sticking points, and you've mentioned being cautiously optimistic about this about this phase and the peace plan. So, looking at the summit that's being held in Sharm el-Sheikh, why do you think Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is absent in this, and how can we expect something that would come out of this without President, it's not President, but Benjamin Netanyahu not being there? Ellen, you might be muted over here. If you could unmute yourself kindly.
Okay, I'm starting with your second question.
Right.
Not much could happen in Israel's absence. And so you can argue, as I am arguing for a long time, but that's irrelevant, that with this particular government, under this particular prime minister, nothing good will happen. Okay. Nonetheless, Israel should have been invited. And you can't have a summit like this without Israel, the entire summit, it's not about regional peace, it's about ending the war in which Israel was attacked and then launched its own reprisal. So how can you celebrate or sign or announce or declare the end of a war without a major partner? Now, going back to the first question, why Israel wasn't invited? Well, I think that Netanyahu was not invited. And when he later pressured to be invited because he figured that not being invited carries some kind of a diplomatic humiliation, and Trump apparently, reportedly, made sure that he is invited last minute, it seems that the president of Turkey, Erdogan, said that if Mr. Netanyahu shows up, then he will not show up. And the Egyptians who are hosting this were afraid that if the Turks don't, if the president of Turkey does not show up, then perhaps other countries will join. So the invitation was retracted. The invitation was rescinded. But I go back now to your second question. Without Israel, this seems like just another ceremony. A lot of flags, a lot of flowers, a lot of talk. Nothing tangible, nothing substantial.
Right, and I would like to take Matthew's take on that. Matthew, do you agree with Alan over here? He has mentioned his view on if this summit can make any difference.
The summit might make a difference, but it is basically a victory lap for President Trump to celebrate the deal the peace deal that he considers himself a master negotiator, the art of the deal and so forth. And I think it's again, it's a victory lap. It's not, it's public relations. And I think, are they actually signing the deal now, where that they have agreed to in principle? I think it is just meant to solidify the deal. I don't know if any new conditions will be agreed upon during this summit. I'm not close enough to the situation to tell you for sure. I think the other guest would know more about that than I would. But this is is basically a ceremony, and it's meant as a celebration, and the parties to the deal are there. It's not clear if Netanyahu is there. I guess that he was invited at the last minute. It seems very strange not to invite Prime Minister Netanyahu just because Turkey's president didn't want him there. The summit is just to help seal the deal. The summit, I don't think, is intended to accomplish much beyond the political purpose of taking credit and celebrating the deal.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for sharing that. That was Matthew Vadam and Alan Pincus. Now we stay on this topic. Buses carrying Palestinian prisoners who have been released under the U.S. brokered ceasefire deal have arrived in Khan Yunis. Now, Israeli Prison Service has confirmed that 250 Palestinians serving long sentences, along with almost 2,000 others who were detained during the conflict, have been released. In exchange, Hamas has freed the last 20 living Israeli hostages, marking a crucial step towards ending 2 years of devastating war in Gaza. President Trump has hailed the moment as the historic dawn of a new Middle East. The release of prisoners is a key element of the first phase of the Gaza peace plan, with the bodies of 28 deceased hostages still in Gaza, expected to be returned under the ceasefire deal. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Matthew Vadam. He's an American journalist, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you, Matthew, for staying with us. Now, looking at the hostage releases, it seems like the deceased bodies haven't been returned yet. And do you think that is it because some of them are under the rubble in Gaza?
I'm not certain. I don't think Hamas has been terribly transparent in explaining delays in releasing dead bodies of slain Israelis. I can only speculate. It's possible that they don't have them, or that they're not in presentable condition, or yes, indeed, they may be not recoverable. They may be concealed under rubble. That's entirely possible. I don't see why they would deliberately withhold handing over corpses unless they think that it would provide them with some kind of leverage in terms of getting the Gaza and the Palestinian prisoners back as part of the hostages for prisoner swap that was agreed upon. So I can only speculate on that point.
With that, I would like to thank Matthew Radham for joining us all the way from US and sharing that insight throughout this topic. Now we move on. US President Donald Trump is considering sending long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. President Trump has said that the missiles would be a new step of aggression in Ukraine's war with Russia. The comments follow a phone call at the weekend between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who has pushed for stronger military capabilities to launch counterattacks against Russia. This comes as the US President is ready to meet his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, at the White House on Friday. Now for this discussion, we're joined by Glenn Grant. He's a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine, joins us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Glenn, for joining us again. Good to see you. Glenn, now since you are, you know the defense and the missiles and stuff, can you tell us how important or how significant are these missiles or equipments that's already been sent to Ukraine for help, and what will the difference be if US decides to also send Tomahawk missiles? Glenn, you might be muted over here. If you could please unmute yourself. Thank you.
I do apologize.
Thank you.
It's very difficult to talk about what has actually been sent because, of course, a lot of things are secret, and all you can see is the effects on the battlefield, and then you have to decide whether that effect is from an American system or actually Ukrainian or even European. Tomahawk is important because of its range and you know, effect power, and it means that it will, because of its range, long range, it will open up a massive amount more targets to Ukraine to fire at, with missiles, not just with drones, because of course the drones that they're flying are much slower, and therefore in many cases a lot more easy to knock down. Missiles, especially Tomahawk, is a sort of missile that's actually quite difficult to hit. So if they're fired at Russia and they fire 2 or 3, you can be pretty sure that one's going to get through, maybe 2 will get through, maybe even 3. Unlike drones where you fire 20 and maybe 2 get through. So it's going to give Ukraine considerably more firepower. But the politics of this, we've been on this subject now for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we still haven't got any closer. And Trump is still only using the word considering, which is one of his favorite words, which means we may get them, but we still have to wait.
Right. And thank you for sharing that, Glenn. And well, we still don't know, as like you've mentioned, we are waiting for Trump's confirmation. So what could be Russia's reaction if this does happen?
frankly, I mean, it's running out of options at the moment. Um, it's especially under pressure with energy and oil especially. And you can see now long queues in Russia all over the place, where there just isn't enough oil for domestic consumption. In other words, using your cars and lorries. Putin in this regard is struggling. And if Tomahawk takes out more of the energy facilities and more oil refineries, a lot of Russian business could actually crack. So we're at you could call it a tipping point at the moment, which Tomahawk could tip things over. But I mean, what else can they do? The worst they can do is go nuclear. But if they do that, then the game is over for Putin and all his rich friends, none of whom will wish Putin to do that, because they know that it's not only the end of them, it's the end of all their families in the West as well.
And now going back to U.S. President, can President Trump also broker a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia like he did between Israel and Hamas? What do you think?
No, there's not the slightest chance at the moment, because Ukraine is not going to go for a ceasefire unless it gets its lands back. Unless there was something really, really dramatic from Trump in the order of magnitude of billions for rebuilding, and he hasn't shown any evidence that he's willing to do something like that. And Putin is keeping going because he can't back down now, and he can't back down for the simple reason that if he does, all those soldiers are going to go back to their hometowns, and there will be absolute chaos across the whole of Russia. All that Putin could do is to keep them in service and go and attack someone else. And I'm pretty sure that he doesn't want to do that, because the someone else would likely be a NATO country. So he's between a rock and a hard place at the moment, and he just has to keep going without really many, as Trump would say, many cards left to play.
Right. And building on that, given the ongoing dialogue between President Zelensky and President Trump, how important is the U.S.'s commitment to Ukraine's defense?
It's important for primarily the intelligence support that America gives Ukraine. I mean, yes, they give them cash and they give them some weapons, but when you add that all up, it's still a lot less than the Europeans are handing over. And Trump has been trying very hard to pull back from supporting Ukraine in a financial way, to force the European countries to actually to take more of this themselves. And the original argument was that this was being done so that Trump could concentrate on China, and the defense could concentrate on China. But we've just seen in the last couple of weeks that America is even pulling back from China. So the excuse for Ukraine has gone out of the window. So I'm afraid we're in a world of very strange decision making with America at the moment, and I have no idea at all what will come out of the meeting with Zelensky and Trump on Friday.
Right, and also some of our guests, Glenn, have mentioned there's some countries in Europe there's a fatigue in supporting Ukraine. What do you think about that?
Oh, I think, yeah, of course there is. I mean, there is an inevitability of fatigue when you have to keep giving something to someone. But I think that there is also a strengthening in some of the countries like UK and Germany and Finland and the Baltic states. Not fatigue, but actually an understanding that not only do they have to keep going, but they've actually got to make their contributions stronger and better. And you see there's more relationships now and more activity now taking place in Poland than there's ever been. So I think you can say that yes, some countries may have fatigue, but it's only going to take a few drones over their airports to shake them out of their complacency. We haven't seen drones over Spanish airports or Italian airports yet, but it's coming. It's coming.
And now, could Europe's expanding military capabilities including anti-drone defenses. How long do you think it will take for Europe to make sure that they can counter all these things?
That is a question that is like, how long is a piece of string? The answer is very difficult because, of course, some countries are going to be there before others. Some countries haven't even started this work at all. They're still looking at their old legacy equipments and they're not really digging into anti-drone systems at all, whereas others are getting quite serious. Latvia, UK are trying extremely hard to bring themselves up to scratch. A couple of years, I would say, before we can start saying that what people were calling the drone wall, a couple of years before a drone wall looks as though it's a real possibility.
And lastly, now, how, as a European and living in Europe, Glenn, how do you see Europe evolving from, a less armed to a highly armed continent or region?
Well, it's not really highly armed, and it's not really highly arming. That would be a mistake to think that we're suddenly seeing tens of thousands more soldiers or millions more equipment. What you're seeing is backfilling for a lot of the equipment that was given to Ukraine. So a lot of the old Soviet stuff that was sitting in countries like Bulgaria, Slovakia, Slovenia, Czech Republic, a lot of those aircraft and those vehicles have been given to Ukraine. So what they're now waiting for is the new ones, whether they come from America or whether they come from European firms like Rheinmetall. So that's and just rebuilding what was already there. And it's the same with the soldiers. I mean, basically the soldiers are beginning to change their emphasis in training by using drones more and by understanding how the drone war actually affects them. But you're not looking at some great shift into this big armored European system. I mean, remember as well, finally, that it's not a European system, it's individual countries. There is no European army, there's no European coherence at all in this. So, it's Germany, it's Poland, it's UK, it's Finland, Norway, they're all separate. And they've all got separate armies and separate systems and separate ways of doing business. So there's a lot more to be done yet to create something that is that you can call Europe.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Glenn Grant for sharing your insight as a former advisor to Defense Minister of Ukraine, joining us live from Riga. Thank you very much, Glenn. Now we move on to our next news. According to government officials, torrential rains that has hit Mexico last week has left at least 64 people dead and 65 still missing. The heavy downpours have triggered landslides, caused rivers to overflow, and cut power in several regions. Mexican authorities have deployed thousands of personnel to assist with evacuations, cleanup efforts, and monitoring the hardest hit areas in Gulf Coast and central states. Veracruz and Hidalgo were the worst affected, with Veracruz reporting 29 deaths and 18 missing, while Hidalgo has recorded 21 deaths and 43 missing people. The power outages have affected 5 states. Electricity has largely been restored. The storm's impact has left a massive toll on infrastructure, and authorities are focused on